Hey strangers, so in this video I want to talk about how I just spent 4 to 5 days in silence in my apartment. So I call it a solo silent retreat. Solitude, silence, no technology. I meditated twice a day. Basically just did my chores. I did read, but I'll get into the nitty gritty of everything. So I did this solo silent retreat from December 26th to December 30th. I actually intended to go until the morning of December 31st, but I ended up breaking the retreat, breaking the silence midday on December 30th. So I ended a little bit early. Now, why did I do this, and why did I do this at this time of year? So what inspired the idea of a solo silent retreat in the first place is the most direct inspiration came from studying Tibetan Buddhism at an institution called Three Jewels. So I learned that in that Tibetan system, a silent retreat usually was 10 days long, but some people there did it for longer. It was a regular part of the Buddhist practice in search of enlightenment. People would go on these silent retreats, and I'm not a practitioner of Buddhism, so I can't tell you exactly, and my memory is not too sharp on it, but more or less the idea is it's an opportunity to go deep into meditation. You retreat from the world and all the distractions out there, and you go within yourself. You meditate, you're in solitude, you're seeking yourself, you're seeking enlightenment in that retreat space. And then you take that experience and you bring it into the world afterwards. So that's where I first heard about this, but obviously, it has parallels to just like a digital detox. And I had heard Cal Newport talk about digital detox in Deep Work or some of his other work, maybe his podcast, I can't remember, but it's a common idea, this detox, this withdrawal, this retreat. Retreats are very popular in the yoga meditation space in general. And there is different levels of extremity, right? Like you could do a completely solo silent retreat. You can go on like a yoga group retreat. You can go on an art retreat. Something that I did once and actually had a really profound experience was just a 24-hour silent retreat in my apartment with my partner at the time. And this was complete silence, no talking to each other, no technology, nothing like that. And just 24 hours, especially in contrast to how constantly we're always engaged with the world. Just 24 hours of complete retreat, complete silence, not taking in all this information, especially from the phone. I think in the more extreme versions, you wouldn't even journal so much. You wouldn't even create so much. You would literally just be there in the silence. Obviously, like I said, there's different extremes that you could take it, but just experiencing that 24-hour silent retreat was so profound. It was very, very difficult, like constantly pushing through this craving to get on the phone and to talk and to yap and to blah, 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 do all these things we're used to doing, but to just push through that and enter the silence and push through a lot of discomfort, really, in order to enter that silence that is so recharging for all the cells in the body, that silence that has a truth in it, that we're constantly drowning out with all the noise, all the mind chatter, all the phone, all the social media, all of it. We lose touch of that silence. So then when you do an experience like a 24-hour retreat like I did at first, it's very profound and recharging to touch that space. I remember after we made it 24 hours, I broke down on the ground crying because it felt so significant what I had accomplished. And maybe, you're listening to this and you think that's sad because you could easily go that long without your phone and in total silence, well then you have a very strong mind. So congratulate yourself. So being that it was so profound when I did that 24-hour version, that's what really inspired me to want to go deeper. And the reason that I chose the period between Christmas and New Year's is that I think it's a spiritually ripe time of year. I feel like literally the fabrics of society, the fabric, literally the fabric of society, the fabric of the matrix loosens up. Everybody starts acting a little bit different. People travel for the holidays. People are not in their usual mind routines. It's almost like during this time of year, I feel like there's an escape hatch where you can step aside, observe, go into yourself, go a little bit deeper, see what's really happening. I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great time of year. It's also spiritually ripe because of, the spiritual meanings of the holidays. Take Christmas, for example. You got the birth of Jesus, right? It's a spiritually ripe time of year. So, but particularly that feeling of like the mind patterns easing up. There's not so much pressure. There's not so much external pressure or self-imposed pressure to participate in society in the clean-cut, normal, formal way. Things kind of ease up a bit, at least with my schedule and my life. That's what I find. So I think it's one of the best times of year to go within. It's also winter. It's a season of slowing down in nature. So for all those reasons, it felt like the right time. I was called to do it. I had that introduction that it's a practice that's done in Tibetan Buddhism, all the way up the lineage to the Buddha. And so I went for it, okay? So, right, and again, you could do this in so many ways. A lot of people will go to a remote place in order to really separate from their world and, really break through that fabric of the matrix in one's own mind. For me, the most accessible way to do it was just within my own apartment. And I firmly believe you don't have to go anywhere to travel great distances within your mind. You could do it right where you're sitting. In one meditation session, you can travel to very far away places in your mind. So I did it in my apartment. Basically was aiming to do, the number one rule was no tech. I really wanted that digital detox to give my brain a break from the constant input and stimulation from social media. And I also wanted to be in silence. Not that I had anyone to talk to by myself in here with no technology. I wanted to do minimal reading and writing. I didn't want to strictly ban it. And I'm glad I didn't, because I ended up having really positive experiences with reading and writing that I'll share. I decided I would allow myself to walk, but I actually did not end up going outside until day 4. So basically when I was winding out of the retreat is when I finally went for a walk. So I was basically inside the whole time. And I kind of just want to walk you through how the experience went and various things that stood out to me. Oh, and if I didn't mention already, I aimed to do 2 20-minute meditations per day. And I'll get deeper into those in a second as well. So day 1, big contrast to the days prior, because leading up to this retreat, I wanted my mind to be totally clear. So I was hustling to get all the work done that I had to do. A lot of client projects and things like that. I didn't want anything to be weighing on my consciousness. I wanted the opportunity to really go inwards. So I was hustling to get all that done. The retreat night came. I had basically just finished everything. I didn't get a chance to clean my apartment, so I turned off my phone, turned off my computer, shoved them in drawers, and then I was entering the retreat on night number 1. Then, as I recall, waking up, I spent that first half of the day kind of soaking in the experience, being in that retreat space, realizing it was really happening. I had multiple days ahead of just nothing. And then I cleaned my apartment. And I also ended up sort of rearranging my space to make a suitable retreat space. And I'll actually turn the phone around and show you the room where I spent the most time in a minute here. But I found it fascinating on this day how, technically I didn't have to do any of that cleaning, any of those chores, any of that rearranging. But I just sort of watched my body and my being naturally spring into action and do all this work and clean up and, vacuum and clean the dishes and rearrange furniture and start to place furniture in all these clever places. And really, I felt like I was already entering the witness perspective. I was just like kind of watching God work through me, or the universe work through me. Like, work was just getting done. And I wasn't really doing it. Something was doing it through me, and it was very cool to just watch that energy happening. This realization brought me peace because we have a lot of work to do in this life. This body requires a lot of upkeep. There's a lot of work that we have to do in order to make money in this society. There's a lot of work to do in this life, but what I realized is, and I noticed this every time that the sun came up, is that energy just kind of, it's not really us, is what I'm trying to say. Something gives that energy to us and moves that energy through us. It's just natural. We wake up, the sun comes up. It's just natural to be like, okay, what are we doing? Let's use our hands. Let's move things around. It's like a human thing. That brought me peace because throughout 2024, such a huge point of stress and anxiety and overwhelm for me was, worrying about working enough. Working so much that I'm working, overtime all day, never turning my brain off because I'm stressed that if I turn my brain off, I'm going to fall behind. What I learned just from watching myself, kind of do this work and naturally have high energy periods where I was doing a lot of work and moving a lot of things around and then having lulls. Another thing that I made sure to do during the retreat was just let myself do whatever I wanted to. So if I wanted to work, I worked. If I wanted to have a lull and take a break, I took a break. If I wanted to take a nap, I took a nap. Something I also did was I hid all of the clocks for the first few days to aid in this effort, because it's crazy. Like, when you glance at a clock, so much happens in your brain, or in my brain, I'll speak for myself, where I'm like, oh my God, it's 6 o'clock. I'm supposed to be having dinner. Oh my God, it's 11 p.m. I'm supposed to be going to sleep. Oh my God, it's 1 p.m. I'm sleepy. I can't be sleepy. It's 1 p.m. I'm not supposed to take a nap. So this calculation that happens anytime I see the clock, I wanted to be rid of that. And I wanted to just be more in tune with my natural tendencies. And I think that I succeeded in doing that. And like I was saying, I watched myself have these energy highs, these energy lows. I just kind of watched it all happen. And it brought me this peace that, in 2025, I want to trust that the work that needs to get done is going to get done. One day at a time. Each day there's work to do each day. I'm going to trust that it's going to get done. I don't want to be in a haste about it. I just want to trust the process and the unfolding. That's what I learned from that rearranging episode. And I want to kind of show you the room a little bit. You'll see my bed frame there. I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I made this really nice cozy nook for myself where I spent most of the time right by the windows. And it was really interesting because it's really busy and bustling out there. You may have heard the cars honking. I almost said honking. Lots of people out there, lots of cars. There's a couple businesses out there. So it was interesting to be in this retreat space spending most of my time right here in this cozy little nook and to see the world going on out there. What that made me realize is that the world's always going to be constantly going crazy out there. There's going to be so much happening, so much stimuli, especially now with our phone. We have instant access to tons and tons of stimuli, always at all times. We have to take it unto ourselves to go inwards and retreat sometimes, not just in this big deal multi-day silent retreat like I'm talking about, but on a nightly basis when we unplug for the day, on a daily basis when we do a 10-minute meditation. These are opportunities to tune into ourselves and visit our own center, because the world's always going to be going nuts out there, and sometimes we're going to have to engage with it. But I think it would be wise if we also take the opportunities once in a while to intentionally withdraw and recharge our centers. I think it's very, very important. Speaking of the windows, what did I spend most of my time doing during this retreat? Looking out the windows, people watching the world go by, staring at the sky, watching the birds, watching the sun go around. At one point in this room, which gets direct evening sun, I just watched this window sun patch just slowly creep along the wall until the sun totally set and it disappeared. And I really, at one point, fixated on the fact that that sun never stops moving. The earth is continuously rotating. Not for one moment is that sun patch completely still on the wall. It's always moving millimeter by millimeter in this fluid, smooth motion. The winds of change are always blowing. A day goes by, it ain't coming back, is what I realized watching that sun move across the wall. Another thing I realized as, I spent extended hours staring out the window, staring at the wall, staring at my plants. I would be in this confined space, but I would be looking out at the sky, and my mind would be going to all these wild places in my imagination, thinking of various scenarios, thinking of things I could do, often thinking of the past and memories. And what I realized is that no matter what's happening to the body, the mind is free. The mind is 100% free. The mind can go wherever it wants to go. This is amazing because the mind creates reality, right? Thoughts create our reality. What we can think of, we can manifest in this world. I truly believe that. So it's a really good thing that the mind is free. Now, it takes time. You have a thought, it doesn't just immediately appear into reality, but if you hold that thought in your mind and take the actions day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, you can manifest that thought into reality. So this is a very good thing, right? We're not limited by anything, really, because the mind is free. And what I've learned over my journey of study and meditation and this sort of thing is that the mind is free, but you have to personally go within and cultivate that freedom. Because if you don't personally go within and cultivate that freedom and realize that your mind is free and practice that freedom, your mind is just going to act out its conditionings. It's just going to act out what was passed on to it by your elders and your society. So if I could pinpoint why I think meditation has been a practice that has worked for me, it's because of that. I was taught a lot of things as a child growing up that I internalized and believed to be true. I was a perfectionist. I'm still unraveling that one. A people pleaser. I'm still unraveling that one. I had all these beliefs that I was taught about how the world works and how I have to be, and the list goes on and on. Were it not for meditation, I wouldn't have had the chance to crack into those stories and to break them and to start to undo them through my actions. So the mind is free, but you have to cultivate it in meditation. And when I say meditation, it also includes practices like a retreat like this. Anything to break out of that matrix of conditionings and society and everything you've been taught, to just take a look at them, to just shine the light of your awareness on everything that you've been taught. Just taking moments to do that is, in whatever way, is all I'm talking about here. And then you can start to take actions to follow through on those discoveries. So one of the journeys that I'm on, that I touched on in a recent video about perfectionism, is, just realizing how much is sold to us and marketed to us that is actually unnecessary. So you might have seen, if I panned my phone correctly, that my mattress is on the floor and I've got this bed frame standing over here. I've been on this minimalism kick, and my practical life situation has led me to want to cut down on spending and expenses in order to find a more practical sense of freedom in this society. And I've been really realizing that, 95% of the things that we think we need to buy, we don't actually have to buy. Okay, and as I was doing my rearranging and just practicing entering this mode of just doing whatever I wanted and disregarding any rules, one night I was sleeping on the mattress, which was on the bed frame, and I just didn't like being up that high. And so I actually ended up sleeping right on the floor, and I was so much more comfortable. So then I ended up resolving in that moment that I'm going to sell my bed frame. And I just had this whole thought process of is a bed frame necessary at all? You can make your own judgment on that, okay? I'm not trying to say get rid of your bed frame, but it's pointing to something bigger. And one of the books that I actually picked up that elucidates this point better than I possibly could is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. Now, it's really interesting about the books that I happened to pick up during this retreat, and I just read little pieces of them here and there. Walden and Desolation Angels by Jack Kerouac was another one. Both books where individuals intentionally go into extended periods of solitude in order to seek truth. I just thought that was an interesting synchronicity that I picked up both of those books. And it was not consciously, maybe subconsciously I chose those, but it was not consciously. I just picked up these books without thinking about it. In Walden, Thoreau takes it to the extreme where he observes all these people in society, and they're basically enslaved to all these purchases that they think they need to make. The big house, all the furniture, all the fancy clothes, the fancy whatever they were buying in the 1800s. And he's like, yo, these people seem like they're enslaved to me. And it seems like you don't need all these things to live a happy life. So he goes out to Walden Pond in the woods, builds his own house, lives on the bare minimum for 2 years, basically to make a point to himself of, okay, what do you actually need to survive and be happy? And if you just do the bare minimum, what other freedom does that afford you? And you'll find in that book that he finds it affords a great deal of not only practical freedom, you don't have to work as much or as hard or be as stressed about it. It also affords you a lot of spiritual freedom, time, energy, the ability to explore different creative pursuits, higher callings, etc. So the bed frame analogy, Walden, they go hand in hand. This is a process, this is a realization that was solidified during this retreat as well, that I think during 2025 for me personally, I'm going to make efforts to continue seeing where I can minimize my lifestyle, continue to see where I can cut down on mindless consumption habits that, I didn't even really realize I was limiting my own freedom in that way by just mindlessly consuming and purchasing things I didn't need. So downsizing, a little bit more minimalism, selling things like the bed frame that I don't need, and slowly trusting the unfolding of this process. The other book, and I also want to tell you guys about my meditations themselves. Freedom by Osho is another one that I picked up. It's also a synchronicity because this really touches on the idea of freedom of mind. And he makes this beautiful analogy. He basically says, don't be a revolutionary where you're fighting the oppressor and you're fighting the capitalists and the leaders and whatever, because then as the revolutionary you get into power, and then you're in power, and then what? Then you gotta lead the nation or whatever. And how often that leads to, like, you just take the French Revolution, I just the other day skimmed like a French Revolution for Dummies YouTube video, and it's like ridiculous the amount of, like, from a good-hearted place, but the amount of violence that came about from that revolution. Osho basically says, like, revolution doesn't work. Like, fighting whoever's leading, it doesn't work. It leads to the same cycles. Instead, he says, be a rebel, and a rebel is more like a dropout. A rebel is more like, kind of like what I was saying, you look at your conditionings and the way you're conditioned to act in society, and instead of fighting whoever's quote-unquote making you be that way, you just silently drop out. And, in the example that I'm talking about, this would look like realizing you don't need to buy all this shit and spending way less money and therefore not working as hard and not working as much. That's how you be a rebel. You just more silently drop out of society. And the argument that Osho makes in this book, which is brilliant, is that if enough people do that at scale, the system won't be funded anymore. Nobody fought it. Everyone just stopped participating because they went inwards and realized there could be another way. And so they just did it in their own individual lives. So it's like you use the matrix to get out of the matrix. The other book I read is A Course in Miracles. This is a complete thought system. That's what it's advertised as. A complete thought system that you can use to basically achieve enlightenment. It's a book that I've been slowly working through. I've studied various thought systems at this point. Tibetan Buddhism is one that I've dabbled with. A Course in Miracles is another one that I've dabbled with. I've definitely learned a lot from this book, and I just picked it up and skimmed things here and there. This one's a more Christian language oriented one, although it's certainly not a Christianity book. It's more of a mystical text, quite aligned with Tibetan Buddhism, actually. One of the central themes is that what you see is actually just your projection. So this lines up with the concept of emptiness in Buddhism, which states that, it states the same thing. Things out there are empty of a nature. We project meaning onto them based on our experiences. So just thought I'd mention that since I mentioned the books that came to me during this experience. A Course in Miracles is very profound. I always have trouble talking about it because I think it's still just so fresh for me. The other thing I wanted to talk about was my meditation. So, the meditations were very profound, 10 to 20 minutes twice a day. And I was basically what I was doing is I would sit down, and I have a meditation posture that's very, very comfortable for me that kind of signals to my brain immediately that it's time to meditate. And being in the retreat space, it was very easy to enter a very, very quiet place in my mind. If there were any thoughts going by in my mind, it was usually pretty quick during these sessions to get below those thoughts. And usually the first thing I would connect to, and how I knew I was entering a good meditative state, was I would just start hearing all these beautiful sounds that I wasn't hearing before, like the clinking dishes of neighbors, having their dinner, distant honking horns from multiple blocks away, or maybe birds chirping on the other side of the apartment out the back windows. It would suddenly be silent, and I would hear all these noises that before that moment were clouded by the incessant hum and buzz of the mind. So I would usually actually, and this is not always can I get here even during an entire meditation session, but I think the retreat energy had me feeling, ready to get there. And then once I got there, I would kind of just bring my focus to the breath. I like to do the sensation of breathing right at the tip of the nose. And I would kind of just be there in that space, still hearing these sounds, but a little more focused on the breath, and just try to stay there. That's it. And these sessions would be very rejuvenating and peaceful. And often this feeling of silence that I'm talking about, where I could hear the distant noises, that was a quality that permeated the retreat at quite a lovely interval. I would experience this silence often, where the mind would slow down, and I would experience this silence. I really liken it to the feeling of being a child. That's the last I can remember when I felt that feeling on an extended basis, was when I was a child. I feel like I remember looking out the window, kind of like I did during this retreat as well, and watching the seasons change, and just being at peace, just watching things pass by, hearing sounds, just being. And it's a way of being. I've been telling myself, like, that feeling, that's the signature of God. That's how you know God's presence is with you. And it's a way of being that has become more and more rare as I've grown older, and the mind has gotten louder, the phones have come in, there's all this chatter, there's all this stress, there's all these responsibilities in society and all these things. So to be able to touch that place for extended periods of time during this retreat was so beautiful. So beautiful. And that's not to say this retreat was not without its challenges. There were moments I particularly struggled after the sun went down. It's winter, really short days. The sun would go down and there would still be a long time before I would get tired before bed. And I would get really bored and really anxious and really want to, go on my phone or computer or do something to fill the space, and to just have to sit there and wait through that and feel all that discomfort was very, very challenging. But making it through those challenges is what led to these silent moments. Usually in life, when we feel those challenging moments, we just pull out the phone, or we smoke something or drink something, we pacify, and we don't make it through that challenging period that unfortunately we have to go through in order to experience God or truth or silence. But so beautiful to be able to taste that in this retreat. And the retreat isn't for the retreat itself. The retreat is so that the retreat is for the future, actually. It's so that I can have that experience, have realizations, and then change my way so that I can be better in the future. And so I'm hoping to cultivate that silence and try to bring that peace with me as best as I darned can during 2025. And I know it's not going to be easy, but I think this experience was personally helpful for me. And what I kind of see is that, like I was saying, you can touch this space. And what am I talking about? It's going into yourself. It's withdrawing from the world for a second and tuning into yourself. This can be touched not only in retreat, but also in daily meditation sessions, which I plan to continue. That's one of my plans of attack for kind of keeping these realizations and this way of being at the forefront of my experience is with daily meditation sessions. I'm going to try for twice daily as long as I can. And also, I love to do nightly unplugs. This one I say with like this nervous hesitation because it's so tough for me because I get so hooked on my phone at night and I want to watch stuff and often fall asleep to my laptop sideways next to my face while I'm watching stuff and soaking stuff in. Like I'll watch videos like this one often, but I think almost having a nightly retreat or a nightly detox would be so powerful for me. But again, this nervous anticipation is because I know it's going to be challenging, but I also know what is on the other side of that challenge, and it's greater peace, greater connection to source, whatever you want to call it. So that has been my experience, spending 5 days in silence between, or it was more like 4 days, between Christmas and New Year's. And that is how I'll be taking this experience with me in 2025. You know what else I want to say on that note? Well, I mentioned the trust, like just trusting that the work is going to get done, and more generally, trusting the process of the greater unfolding and having less fear and being more brave and just doing the thing is my intention. So that's it. I hope you found this interesting. I'll see you next time.